In today's webinar, we're going to be covering the Actions panel and the Calendar panel. This session will include seeing what needs to be actioned across the whole portfolio, workflow templates, automatic assignments, and the features within the calendar, including linking to your outside calendars. The first thing that we're going to cover is where to find the Actions panel, and just to explain what we are looking at when we are looking at the Actions panel. So as you can see, I've logged into my account here. I'm actually going to choose the focus mode today, and I'm going to select the Actions panel box there at the side, and now all I can see is the Actions panel. The focus mode is quite useful, by the way, if you just want to concentrate on one panel at a time. I can of course turn that off and scroll down to the Actions panel or select it in the side menu here. So here is the Actions panel for this account. So I'm just going to talk through what we're looking at here. So the Actions panel, I think, is arguably one of the most important panels in the entire system. The Actions panel is where you're going to find things, tasks, actions that you need to complete across the whole portfolio. So these might be that you've got a tenancy agreement that has been signed in the onboarding, it needs to be reviewed. You might find a gas safety certificate has come up for renewal. So all of those things are going to appear in your Actions panel. So this is what the Actions panel looks like. We've got filtering options at the top here, which is very much the same as the filtering options in various other panels in COHO as well. So we can look at actions that are all of them. We can look at actions that are just mine or unassigned, or just actions that are assigned to myself, for example. I can also filter by property. So if I just want to look at the actions for a particular property, I can select the property and it will just leave me with the actions for that particular property. I can also filter by action type. I can also filter by tags. So if you've used tags to tag a property, maybe down at property level, you can also use the filtering by tag option. We've also got filter by status. So if you want to look at what is new, in progress, on hold, or completed, we can filter by the status. Now you can snooze actions, which I'll talk about in just a second, and we do have a checkbox there to include any snoozed actions. So if you have snoozed something and you want to actually see that action still, you can include the snoozed. And we can also toggle to show only workflow tasks. I will be covering workflow templates very, very shortly. So then underneath the filtering, we've got 6 boxes here. Now, as is the norm and typical in COHO, anything that is this magenta or pink colour, it generally means that there is something for you to do. And anything that is green, as you can see, under maintenance, onboarding, viewing and other, they are appearing as all green and appearing as all done. So basically there are no actions in those particular categories. I'm going to look at the property action in just a second, but I want to talk about the rest of this panel. So there is a button there to add an action. So this comes quite important, actually, a little bit important later on when creating a manual workflow template. So again, I'm going to cover that in more detail, but you can of course create ad hoc actions. So if there is anything that you want the system to alert you to that is generally not automatically triggered by the system, you can actually create your own ad hoc actions. You can name them whatever you like. We can also generate a report. So what will happen if we click that button is it will open up a new window for us and list all of the actions in all of those different categories for us. We can also export to CSV. So there is a very big difference between export CSV and export all CSV. If we export CSV, it's going to give us a CSV report of all of the actions that we currently have in our actions panel. If we export all CSV, it will export every action that we've ever had, so even completed ones across the whole portfolio. Now, when we do click this button, you will see that it can take a very long time, depending on how long you've been on COHO, how many actions you do have. So do be aware that it will probably take a little bit of time to download all of the completed actions as well. Underneath there, we've got the workflow template. So I am going to go into the workflow templates in a lot more detail. They are really, really useful to use. And then underneath, we've got automatic action assignments. So automatic action assignments are automatically, once they trigger in the system, will be assigned to a team member if you have set them up to be automatic. So what we're going to look at now is I'm going to concentrate on the property category there, which is very typically the norm that you're probably going to have more actions in that particular category. So if we click on the property one, we've got 30 actions. I'm just going to scroll down very slightly so we can take a look at this list here. So what we're looking at here are property related actions. So they're typically going to be gas safety needs to be, is required. You've got PAT testing that's due, smoke detector tests are due. They are actions triggered by the system based off of the information that you have already entered into the system. You're going to get those triggers in this category. Now, anything that is bold and highlighted, as you can see, we've got a few at the top here. These are typically past their due date, so it becomes very visually apparent to you of things that have already gone past due. And then they will typically go in date order below. What we've got here at the side, on the left-hand side, we've got the option to assign this particular action to another team member. So if I click on the assigned button there, as you can see, anybody that is a user in your account, you can assign them to yourself or to somebody else. We've got the title, we've got the property address, we've got the due date. Now what we can do here is there is a little bell icon. Now if we click this, this is the snoozing of actions. Maybe an inspection has come up as due and you maybe just actually want to roll that on a week or two, you're not quite ready to get round to it yet. So what we can do is click on the little bell icon. We get this little box that appears. COHO generates a tomorrow, in 3 days, next week, next month, or in 3 months. So you can easily select one of those options, or we can enter in a date of our liking. We've also got the status as well. So that was covered in the filtering on the filter by status. So everything that is new appears as new. And then of course we can click on that status there and select whether it is in progress or on hold. The other thing that we can do on the very right hand side here, which is probably a really, really important one to bear in mind, is to actually action the action, take care of it, do something with it from here. So for example, I've got a gas safety certificate that is required on 3 Humber Grove here. If I click view and I just scroll down very, very slightly, you'll see that you get all the options exactly as I would have done if I'd clicked into the property and gone down to the gas safety certificate panel and opened that panel up and chosen to add the document on there. You've got exactly the same options. So actually completing your action from the actions panel can be slightly quicker. You can get away from doing sort of 3 or 4 extra clicks by just taking care of it from the actions panel. So it's exactly the same as what you've seen when adding your compliance in. You've got your valid from, valid to, you've got notes, and then somewhere to drop the file in. The next section that we're going to cover is the workflow templates. These are really, really useful and can actually be created in a couple of different ways. Now, the 2 ways that you can actually create these is by first off clicking add template. Now you can create a workflow template which is allowing you to create a set of individual steps that can be assigned to individual team members in order to complete either a standard COHO action or just an action that you want to create. So these are the 2 actions. You've got a manual action and you've got built-in actions. Built-in actions, when you create a workflow template, they will automatically trigger when COHO triggers the action in the first instance. So a good example of that is, for example, when COHO says a gas safety certificate is required, there is probably 3 or 4 things that you do, 3 or 4 tasks that you complete in order to get that new gas safety document and then add it to COHO. So that would be a classic example of a built-in action. A manual action is different. These are not automatically triggered when COHO tells you to do something, and these are created in a little bit of a different way. So the first thing that I'm going to actually cover is the built-in actions, because these are super powerful and really straightforward. So if I click built-in action, the system then wants me to select the action type. So I've got a drop down box here with a lot of different options here. So if I scroll down, for example, I want to create a built-in action that tells me when the EICR is required, for example. You can then name your template, so you can change this if you want to, but COHO will default it to the action type. And then I'm going to click continue. So what I'm going to do here is outline my steps, the steps I take between COHO telling me that an EICR is required and me actually getting that document ready to put in the system. So step one might be something like calling an engineer, for example, and get an appointment in place. Step two might be something like notifying tenants that an engineer is going to come out to the property on a particular time and date, so they should make the property available, or obviously, you know, keys will be given to the engineer, or whatever your process is. Step three might be something like making sure that the invoice has been paid once the work has been completed. And step four might be something like making sure that I've actually got the new EICR document and I've uploaded that onto COHO. So that is very sort of brief. You can add as many steps as you need to, and you can name them whatever you need to name them. As you can see on the side here, we can also assign these individual steps to individual team members. So if we use the drop down box there, we can say that we are responsible for calling the engineer, for example. We're responsible for notifying tenants, but actually somebody else is responsible for making sure that the invoice is paid, for example. As you can also see, if you make a mistake or you want to get rid of a step, you can also delete them at the side. Underneath, you can also add additional instructions. So if, for example, step 3 of paying the invoice has also got a little bit more of a workflow to it, if you're using Xero, for example, you can also provide additional information for the above steps there. And we can also add any additional files if that is also necessary. And then at the bottom there, it's asking us if we want to automatically apply this workflow to every single time COHO says an EICR is coming up, regardless of which property it is. So we can checkbox there if we need to, and then click create. It is really that straightforward. As you can see here, I've created some workflow templates, so I can also edit these if maybe there's an additional step or a mistake has been made. I can also archive them as well. So if I'm not wanting to use that workflow template anymore, I can actually archive it. And we do have a toggle box there to show any archived templates that we do have. Now, if we look at the manual action templates, these don't automatically trigger when COHO is already telling you to do something. So these are really quite sort of random workflows that you do have, or processes that you've got within your business. So a good example of this is when you are onboarding a new property owner, for example. There is obviously the property ownership panel in COHO where you can add the owner's information, but there is also probably a series of steps that you take. You've got a process in place for when you have a new property owner, maybe sending contracts or going through terms and how long you're going to be managing the property for them. So that is quite different. There is obviously nothing that triggers in COHO. So that would be a good example of a manual action. Now, again, you can name your template, whatever you want it to be. And then I'm going to click continue. So the process from here is exactly the same as a built-in one. We're just going to go through and create our workflow steps by adding as many steps as we need to. And of course, if we want to assign them to a particular team member, we can of course do that. And again, we can add additional instructions. And again, we can add additional files. Now at this point, we'll just click create. Now, as you can see, I have already created a add new property owner template, and it is falling underneath the miscellaneous custom actions. So as you can see here with the steps that have been created, how many steps are in that workflow, and you can also see whether it's being automatically triggered by the system. So as you can see, I've got a gas safety certificate required. That is going to automatically trigger, and I've also created a workflow for a tenancy move out date step as well, so that is also going to automatically trigger. With this top one, with adding a new property owner, that is not going to automatically trigger. So in order to be able to see that workflow and actually check things off to make sure that you're completing all the processes, what we actually need to do is to create an ad hoc action. So if we click add action, you will see here that you can create just a single action. That can literally be absolutely anything that you want. Maybe you need a reminder from the system that you need to go into town and get some keys cut. Maybe you need an action to alert you to going to have a lunch meet with a property investor or a new owner, something like that. That would just be a one-off action. So you can create those. They are really, really easy to use. So if we click single action, you choose a property, you put in a title, you give it a due date, and you give it a snooze until date. So the due date is when it is actually due. That's the sort of final end date that you do have. Snooze until will be a little bit of time before that due date. So you may need, a couple of days notice or a week's notice before that due date comes up. You can also assign it to another team member, and you can also add some detail. Now, if we click on the workflow option, this is where we can actually select the workflow. So we can add new property owner. That ties into the workflow action that I've just created. I can choose the property here. I can change the title if I want to. And again, I can give it a due date, a snooze until date. I can assign it to a particular team member, and I can also add some detail and add that into the system. Now, you need to do this for a manual action workflow. You've created the manual action workflow, but it doesn't sit anywhere in COHO until you actually create an ad hoc action. Once you have done that, so if we actually give this one a due date, let's say the 24th of May, and we're going to snooze it until the 23rd of May, I'm going to assign it to myself. I'm going to leave out the details for now, and I'm going to click add. So I've just refreshed my page to make sure that everything is updated. I've also checkboxed the include snooze because I wanted to show you that I've created this ad hoc action which has my workflow template attached to it. Obviously, I set a date in a couple of weeks' time and snoozed it until the day before. So typically I wouldn't see that until that snoozed date is coming round. So I've included the snooze. And as you can see now in my other category at the side, I've got that add new property owner action for me. As you can see the status there, I've got my 3 steps and 0 out of 3 are in progress. And if I click view here, I've got all of that information about the workflow here. And I can actually check box these off as I complete them, and as you can see it will say when it is completed and that status has actually updated. So that covers the manual workflow templates. Just to reiterate, if you create a manual workflow template that will not automatically trigger when COHO tells you to do something, you will need to create an add action down at the bottom there and choose the manual workflow template that you've created, and it will fall into the other category on your actions panel. If we actually look at the property category again for something that does automatically trigger when COHO tells you to do something, as you saw, I've created one for when a gas safety certificate is required. And as you can see, if we look at the status here, every gas safety certificate that is required has got that status of in progress because there is a built-in action workflow template, going alongside it. So if we click view on this gas safety that is required, there's our workflow template at the side, and again we can checkbox those off as we complete them until we've actually got the document ready to drop into the system. So that covers the workflow templates. They can definitely be really, really useful to making sure that the whole team is following the same processes within the business. So it's definitely worth taking the time to get in those set up ahead of time. The last section of the actions panel that we're going to look at is automatic action assignments. These can be really useful, especially if your team is quite large and each team member is responsible for particular areas of the business. So if we look at automatic action assignments, what we can do here is automatically assign particular actions when they are triggered to individual team members. This kind of gets you away from looking at the actions panel, looking at the list, and then manually assigning them in that left-hand column that we've seen before. So if we look at the automatic action assignments, we can click Add Assignment. Now here we can choose the action type. So this might be a new maintenance issue has been reported. We can also choose whether it is for all properties or just a selection of properties, and then we can choose who we are actually assigning these to. So there we've got our list of users that have been added into the account, and we can select those accordingly. Now, just to let you know, when you create an automatic action assignment, it will not update the actions in your actions list that you already have. It will just do them going forward. So if you've already got a load of maintenance issue that have been reported actions, and then you go create an action assignment to a particular team member, they're not automatically going to get assigned to them. You will still have to do those manually, but any new maintenance issues that have been reported going forward from when you do create the automatic action assignment, they will be automatically assigned to that team member. So then, of course, when we do look at the property actions at the top here, or any of the other categories, you will be able to see that these actions have already been assigned to the particular team members. Like I said, it will not update the ones that you already have, but any new ones that are triggered going forward, the system will automatically assign them to the relevant team member. You can also create multiple actions to multiple people as well. So if you want a maintenance issue that's been reported maybe, and we also want to do an unactioned maintenance issue, we can of course select that. So you can create a bulk of list, if you like, of automatic action types and assign them to one particular team member. The last part that we're going to look at is the calendar. So I'm going to select the calendar at the side here. I'm staying in focus mode so that we're just looking at one panel at a time. And here's the calendar. So the reason that I talk about actions and the calendar is because they're very much intertwined with each other. People like to use the actions panel because they like to look at things in a list format. They are in due date order. Other customers of ours like to look at things across a calendar view. So it really depends on what type of view that you do want to look at. So looking at the calendar panel here, we've got those relevant filtering options at the top. And if we scroll down, I'm actually going to select the month view here because that is very typical of looking at a calendar. So now I've got the entire month of May. I've got all of my actions in a calendar view. So all of these actions here are also in the actions list below and obviously dated accordingly. And I can actually take care of them from here as well. So for example, if we look down at the bottom here, we've got adding a carbon monoxide detect check. That is obviously on our actions panel below. But if you like to look at it from a calendar view, I can of course click on the adding of the carbon monoxide detect check information, and I've got exactly the same information that I would have available to me if I'd clicked on view and wanted to add the information on the actions panel. Or again, you can also drop into a property, go down to the relevant panel and add the information in from there. So it really all depends what kind of view that you do want to have. At the bottom here, we can also create items. So this is very much the same as adding an ad hoc action on the actions panel. If you want to create an action, we can choose whether it is an action or a viewing type. And again, we can choose a single action or a workflow template action, and we've got exactly the same information there. So again, it depends really which panel you are using, and you've got the same options available to you. The other part to look at here on the calendar is there is a settings cog in the corner, which is really quite important. If we click on the settings cog here, COHO does have the ability to create an iCal link so that you can actually sync your calendar items into a calendar outside of COHO. So that might be a shared team Outlook calendar, for example. Now it doesn't work the other way. So when you add in something into your Outlook calendar, for example, it doesn't sync back into COHO. This is just directly for adding your items into COHO, and then it will sync to your outside calendar. Now what we can do here is click add iCal link, and you can see the type of calendar items that will actually be synced to your outside calendar. So as you can see, this covers viewings, scheduled maintenance items, actions that are due, and tenancy changeovers and renewals. You can also show events assigned to. So if you need to look at different users, you can do that. And we can actually create a link. Now what you will get is a URL link. Now depending on what email provider that you are using outside of COHO, creating how you add that link into that particular provider will differ. Now in our product guide underneath actions and calendar, if you actually go to the calendar section of the product guide, I've listed a couple of sort of examples of, I think Gmail is there, I think Outlook is there, there might be a couple of others there that we've written up as well. This is where we've been absolutely certain on where you paste that URL link that is provided to you, because like I said, depending on the provider, they've got different setting options and different steps that you need to take to actually put that link in. So if you do want to use this, I would definitely refer to the product guide, go to the actions and calendar section, go to the calendar section at the bottom of that particular page of the guide, and you'll see those examples there. I hope that has been useful today. Like I said at the beginning, the actions panel is probably one of the most important panels in the entire system. So if you can get used to using workflow templates, getting your actions assigned to particular team members as well, it can be very, very useful. Also, obviously, if you're looking to use the iCal links, definitely refer to the product guide. I will link that in the description. I'll also drop it into the chat on the webinar as it is going ahead. So I hope that has been very, very useful.